Welcome to Story Chat Radio. We are book editors Carly Hayward and Jenny Chappell. Every month we watch a different movie with an eye for storytelling and novel writing.
We use our years of training and experience editing novels to break down each movie's storytelling elements to help you improve your novel in progress.
Warning, Jenny ruins everything.
Hey, you ruin things too.
So don't be surprised if there are spoilers. On this episode of the podcast, we are discussing the Marvel adventure movie Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yay! Here come the spoilers. In 1988, a young Peter Quill is abducted from Earth by Yondu, the leader of a group of space pirates that call themselves the Ravagers. As an adult, Quill, now known as Star-Lord, at least by him, steals an orb wanted by a warlord named Ronan the Accuser. In an attempt to sell the orb, Quill finds himself pursued by a group of bounty hunters, including Gamora, who is working for Ronan. After an epic fight, Quill, Gamora, and two other bounty hunters, Rocket and Groot, are arrested and sent to prison. There they meet Drax, whose family was killed by Ronan and who seeks revenge. Together, they escape in possibly one of the most entertaining escape/heist scenes ever, and travel to Nowhere, a floating city in space, to sell the orb to the Collector, a powerful being who, shockingly, collects rare and dangerous artifacts. They learn that the orb they have contains an Infinity Stone, which is a powerful object that Ronan plans to use to destroy the planet Xandar. But Ronan and his forces attack Nowhere, and our heroes are forced to flee. The group teams up with the Nova Corps, the police force of Xandar, to stop Ronan and save the galaxy. They force Ronan's ship to crash, and he emerges from the wreck, prepared to destroy Xandar. But Quill distracts him in a really interesting way. I guess we're giving spoilers. And if you haven't seen this movie yet, he uses a dance battle, which confuses Ronan more than anything else, and allows Drax and Rocket to destroy Ronan's Warhammer, which is now embedded with the Infinity Stone. Quill grabs the freed stone, and with Gamora, Drax, and Rocket sharing its power burden, uses it to vaporize Ronan. Then the ragtag team of misfits are hailed as heroes. They decide to continue working together as the Guardians of the Galaxy to protect the galaxy from threats. Carly, what did you think of this movie?
Okay, well, first of all, I just realized that the synopsis skips over the saddest part, which is Groot sacrificing himself.
Yeah, that was intentional.
Oh, sorry.
Are you trying to make me cry?
Jenny wrote the synopsis, so that would be why it was not there. Oops. Okay, never mind. Anyway, I really enjoyed this movie. I think I very much get bogged down in Marvel movies, and I kind of forgot that this one is really fun and stuff. It's been a while since I first saw it, and I was pleasantly surprised that I still liked it. Because when we first picked it, I was like, fine, another superhero movie. Even my husband, started it with me and was planning on heading out to do other things. But then he ended up staying the whole time, and it was a good time. Peter Quill is kind of meh, as, often we feel about the straight white leads. But all the other characters are way more interesting, and we haven't done in a very long time, which I think is great in the movies we've been picking, of here's the female character or female side character I wish this movie was about instead. Obviously Gamora's story is way more interesting than Peter's, but whatever.
Obviously.
It's fine. And also Rocket is way more interesting.
He is.
I've heard the third movie is kind of more for him, which is kind of exciting. But anyway, it was good. What do you think?
Yeah, so I remember watching this when it first came out and thinking that the ways it deviates from standard sort of MCU storytelling felt really fresh and exciting in comparison with seeing 10 other movies that are basically feel all the same. Mm-hmm. Like, I didn't love the sequel to this one,
Yeah.
but going back and rewatching the first one I thought was super fun. It definitely feels much more character-centered than a lot of the other Marvel movies. And I always love a scruffy group of rogues out to do some good and make some coin along the way.
Same.
I think what I love most is that we didn't have that standard, like, gathering the team beginning where we see, like, everyone's backstory and everyday life and yada, 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 because that can feel really slow. So in this one, like, the group comes together in a much more organic way as the story moves along. And then it's so fun, so full of, like, fun little personalities and quirks. And so, yeah, it's just a fun movie.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so what do you think is something that this movie does well the authors can use in their writing?
The heroine's journey.
Woo!
Woo! All right, so the heroine's journey is a narrative structure that focuses on the growth and transformation of the main characters. So the story goes that the creator of the heroine's journey, Maureen Murdoch, asked Joseph Campbell about women within the hero's journey. And he responded with, women don't need to make the journey. In the whole mythological tradition, the woman is already there. All she has to do is realize that she's the place that people are trying to get to.
And look pretty.
And look pretty.
And smile.
And smile. Yay, Joseph Campbell, except not. Okay. So, to be clear, a lot of this is kind of legend a little bit at this point. So, you never know with stuff. But basically, the heroine's journey, and the most important part, is that it was created as a response to the traditional hero's journey, which centers around the strength and resolve of a hero, which we discussed in the last episode, where the hero's journey is about the big hero basically sacrificing himself or themselves, often metaphorically, their happiness, etc., for the good of others. Meanwhile, the heroine's journey has a better outcome than that doesn't focus on the masculine ideal of ending up alone, strong, but lonely. So, the big thing to understand here is how the feminine and masculine are defined in relation to storytelling and the structure. It's about the divine feminine and masculine. It isn't about gender or sexual identity. It's about the societal ideals and underpinning of those terms. So here the feminine represents the familial, the welcoming, the network of people and safety, emotions, etc. But they are often an outsider that's kind of pushed aside or other or marginalized. It's about the connectedness we feel with our loved ones. Those are seen as feminine qualities. As an aside, a lot of what I'm saying is going to sound very sexist, and it is frustrating for me. But keep in mind, these are ideas based on societal interpretations, historical thoughts, etc. So anyway, the masculine instead represents strength, isolation, separation, and other, like, typically masculine roles. It's about being that strong pillar for those around you, but not being part of the family. Separate, but supportive. Someone that is accepted by society, which is key, but extraordinary, usually, in some way. So yay for fun, historically harmful stereotypes. Anyway, all of this is to say that you do not need to be a female to go on the heroine's journey, which is why we picked this movie. It is about contending with these issues outside of how they actually relate to gender and sexual identity, even though we will be using the terms feminine and masculine a lot.
Right. Yeah, I know a lot of people, including, me, sometimes in the beginning. Well, I think when I'm talking about it, like when you're saying feminine, it's hard not to think of it in terms of gender.
Yes.
But yeah, a lot of people struggle with the idea that the main character must obviously be a woman or a girl. Like many things in writing, which we have said here before, this is not the greatest term for this. In many ways, when we're talking about the feminine and the masculine is the thing that's like accepted by society and like the thing you're quote unquote like supposed to do or whatever. And the feminine is like everything else. All the stuff we want to hide and forget about is the feminine.
So fun.
So I know it's great. It's great. So there are a few characteristics that I look for to determine if a story fits the heroine's journey, and they have nothing to do with gender. But it is hard when you're like researching. So like when we were trying to think of like a movie to watch for this, we had a really hard time finding like what's a story that's not about a woman or a girl. Because of course that's what you're going to think of.
Yes.
But so the characteristics that I look for are one, main characters that are outsiders and try to do things the way they're like supposed to do, that their society says they're supposed to do, by repressing their own instincts or behaviors. So like they're trying to be, what people want them to be or whatever, and may or may not be having much success with that. The second is that they will often have like a temporary success, or a success that feels hollow. And then three is, in order to overcome like the final obstacle, the main character has to do things their own way, because doing things the quote unquote right way didn't really fix the problem. So let's dig into that a little bit more. So the feminine, quote unquote feminine, often has sort of a societally prescribed role as an outsider of some kind. In an attempt to reach their goals, they choose a path that's different from that prescribed societal role. Gearing up to like fight an organization or a role or a group that's limiting their life options, or entering into like a dominant identity kind of sphere. So this basically means that you would have like someone who has these attributes that are not accepted in the general kind of society, and that in order to try to do the things they want to do, that they have to kind of work around all of that. And one of their goals overall is kind of try to find their place in this society that doesn't really have a place for them right now. So then after they kind of try to do that, the heroine's journey really kind of lines up with the hero's journey at this point. Because like the protagonist encounters trials and, they're going to have some success usually. That's typically where the hero's journey kind of ends. Like they go out, they do the thing. But in the heroine's journey, this is where the success is either temporary, illusory, shallow, require some kind of betrayal of their self or like their identity over time. So the main character faces a crisis in which like they realize this new way of life is insufficient, or their success wasn't really what they thought it was going to be. It wasn't like a full and complete success. And so at this point they'll fall into some kind of despair because right, the things they've been trying to do, they were like, okay, well, I've got these qualities no one appreciates, so I'm going to pretend and try to do all the things that I'm supposed to do. And then I do, and it doesn't really work out. And so now I'm really bummed out because nothing I've done is working. Doing things my way didn't work. Doing things the way I was supposed to didn't work. So what am I supposed to do? Just be a failure for the rest of my life?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
what you
it.
get for
In
being
the end.
feminine. So this is where it makes the main character kind of yearn to reconnect with their way of doing things. Like they were working for them in many ways, but they weren't getting them the results they wanted. And so at this point, it's like they've changed too much by trying to do the masculine or dominant group things. And they can't really go back to doing things the way they used to. So now, again, they're just stuck. They just are not sure what they need to do. And so in the process of this, it helps them really reevaluate and reclaim some of those outsider values and skills and attributes. But now they view these traits from a new perspective, which really lets them make peace in their own way with that sort of more masculine, quote unquote, right way to do things. And also sort of find the way those things apply to them. So it's basically like, I'm going to try to kind of do things the way, quote unquote, I'm supposed to, but I'm going to do that my way. So you're just kind of combining everything into one point. And so in order to face down that sort of world, final challenge, future with a new understanding of themselves and the world, the main character really has to integrate these masculine and feminine or dominant and repressed qualities and perspectives. It really lets them see through binaries and interact with a more complex world that includes them as an outsider, but is also larger than just their lifetime or their society or whatever. So it really offers up this new perspective of, yes, you may be an outsider, but you can still have success. You can still do things, and you can make things work using your own skills and attributes.
Yep.
It's a lot of complex stuff.
It's a lot of complex stuff. So another characteristic of the heroine's journey really emphasizes the importance of relationships and community in the protagonist's kind of growth and transformation. So often main characters face challenges rooted in their relationships, in societal expectations, or the pressure to conform to those traditional roles. People want them to do as their society has always done, like Jenny said. But instead, the main character is going to form a found family, even if they're part of their original family, that understands their goals and needs. They create this kind of network or a connection with people that, quote unquote, get it. Now, I wonder how this movie could possibly align with that. It's not like they form a cohort called the Guardians of the Galaxy or anything. But the key here isn't just that they form a group. It's not just like the gathering of allies. But it's that this group really understands each other. They have similar ideals and understandings, even when they disagree. They support each other and fill in talents to create that whole.
Yeah.
And this brings me to my favorite part of the heroine's journey. The heroine doesn't need to be heroic alone. They don't need to take that big defining action. A heroine is strong in that they recognize the talents of those around them and help to lead them by utilizing their individual strengths. They can kind of be a manager of sorts, which sounds boring, but so it is actually very exciting to me. So in this movie, Peter recognizes that Gamora is better at kicking butt, that she has a knowledge of the ship that no one else does. He recognizes Rocket's talents with like tech and piloting. Honestly, his main role and his main big moment is to act as a distraction during that big final showdown so that Rocket can take that big shot. It's about the team, and the heroine values the talents and uniqueness of the members of the team. And I just absolutely love that in every way. A hero often has sidekicks, but the hero in the end goes it alone, and it all comes down to them. But the heroine raises up those around them and utilizes this found family to create a network and defeat an antagonist, and that's a much more fun story to me.
What I'm hearing is that we are turning this from a discussion of structure into a discussion of leadership. This is becoming like a leadership seminar.
Yes. So utilize those talents around you. Be a good manager.
Lift everyone else up.
Lift everyone else up.
A rising tide lifts all ships and whatnot.
And etc. and other platitudes.
No, I agree. I really like that about it as well. Yeah, and I think that is part of how this is that kind of response to the hero's journey. Is
exactly.
It's like, that's a good starting place, but that's not, sufficient for every single story, every single character. So I mentioned before that this element of like their way versus the right way is one of the traits I often see in stories that follow the heroine's journey. There's a phrase here that is often used. The terminology is the shadow self, and it's used to describe that element of like their way in a lot of ways. So it's a really important part of the structure. So keep in mind that the heroine's journey is all about bringing together not just your community, but like the parts of you that have been disconnected and at odds with each other. So as, you know, the hero is all about strength and resolve and, you know, having character. The heroine's journey is about kind of acknowledging those pieces of yourself that are going unused and unvalidated, that you've been kind of repressing. And so all of those pieces of you that have been repressed are the shadow self.
This is one example of where I actually really like the term. I like the term shadow self.
Totally.
Good job, world.
Right. So the shadow self is the part of the character that they really want to deny or that feels too difficult for them to accept. It represents a character's repressed emotions and beliefs. So during the course of the story, the character is forced to confront those things about themselves that they've tried to ignore or reject. Interestingly, in this movie, we see several characters having to do this. So Peter's shadow self is his vulnerability, like that child who was taken from his home. He is trying in many ways to live up to the gender stereotypes of a man that is supposed to be strong mentally and physically. And to him, that means not opening himself up to any kind of emotional intimacy, whether that's romance, friends, even really acknowledging sort of the family that he has in the Ravagers. So we see how even as he tries to cover his vulnerability with bravado and arrogance, he hasn't really been able to let go of that part of himself and move on to find the courage he really needs to be a hero. So because his understanding of strength is limited by this internalized belief, and it really shows up in a bit of rebellion against that role. So, you know, like he keeps acting like a child, basically, because he's never really embraced that vulnerable side of himself. Of course, once he does, he doesn't stop acting like a child because it's ingrained in his personality by that point. But he's able to set aside some of the selfishness and, like I said, that bravado and arrogance that comes along with it. And so then once he really lets himself engage in that vulnerability in relationships, he's able to reach his true potential. So like Carly said, this is where he's able to recognize, you know, I can see these strengths in other people. Let me let them do that instead of me having to be the one who, you know, is always, well, I guess he's still kind of the center of attention. Funny how we work that out, isn't it?
It's so weird, but, you know.
Yeah, so it really goes back to that whole, like, divine feminine thing, being about emotions and the internal world more than about, you know, action and doing.
And at the end, he isn't like, I, Star-Lord, saved you. He's like, the Guardians of the Galaxy saved you.
Right.
There's still some.
It is. But I also think it is still important to recognize that, like, even though he has that shift in his personality, he's not a totally different person.
Exactly.
You know? So it's not like he has this shift and, like, all of a sudden he's very serious because he's a grown-up now.
Yes, that's true. All right, so another aspect of the heroine's journey that I love is that protagonists often have to rely on their instincts and emotional intelligence rather than strength alone to navigate those challenges and make important decisions. Again, these are typically quote-unquote feminine qualities, and it's about divorcing, there we go. Divorcing oneself from the typical masculine quality of strength. Because obviously the masculine is only about strength mentally and physically and nothing else. Okay. Sorry. My saltiness gets away from me when we get into gender stereotypes. So, intuition in particular is often seen as a feminine quality and is often looked down upon. So, emotional intelligence is kind of the same way too. So the heroine here uses these abilities to help win the day. Peter saves the day because he saves Gamora, and that is a purely instinctual gut reaction when he goes off and tries to gives her his oxygen. He even says once they're rescued that he doesn't know why he did it, he just had to. Of course, because like Jenny said, he's still Peter. He then laughs it off saying it makes him a hero, blah, blah, blah. But what it actually does is make him a heroine. Again, see Jenny's wonderful description of the struggle with the masculine and the shadow self. But anyway, in calling Yondu and saving Gamora, he has made it possible for them to stop Ronan. In fact, most of his big moves are based on like being clever and predicting what others will do. In their first fight, Gamora is clearly stronger, but Peter uses tricks and tech to cleverly get away from her. It doesn't all work out because others step in and yada, yada, yada. But here, he's using intelligence to get away. And then we get to, like, Drax, who wants to kill Gamora, plain and simple. But Peter sees that it would be better for them, and Drax, if he sticks around and uses Gamora to find Ronan and seek his revenge. Here, Peter is basically using his emotional intelligence to manipulate the situation.
Right.
He's clever. He's relying on gut instincts, which is basically intuition, but phrased in a more masculine way, to save the day. So all of his moves are based on reading people, playing to their emotions, and really being clever, not physically strong.
It's true. It's true, which sort of begs the question then, why did he have to like gain all that muscle weight to be in this role?
Because he's a hero.
So he has to be strong physically still, even if he doesn't really use the strength.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And so then lastly, but possibly most importantly, is that the heroine's journey emphasizes the importance of personal agency and empowerment. Mm-hmm. So, yes, all stories need protagonists who have agency, meaning that they can and do make choices and take actions to try to change their situation and affect the plot. But when it comes to the heroine's journey, the empowerment aspect is really important. So stories that follow this structure often have a character arc or theme that revolves around moving from a place of disenfranchisement or exclusion to understanding the power of finding your people, validating yourself, using those skills that you've been trying to repress, all of that kind of stuff. So these characters are fighting against not only their own internal obstacles, like any character does, but also the limitations placed on them by their role as an outsider in their society. So these limitations will likely be external. Mm-hmm. For example, not being able to do certain things or go certain places or having to go to extreme measures to do so, as well as internal, like the character not even considering some options because they aren't available to people in that in that societal role. Because this is called the heroine's journey, it's easy to get caught up on gender, but this is really about any way that people are marginalized or made to be outsiders. So, for example, in our movie, the whole cast is outsiders. They're criminals. They're anti-establishment. Gamora has even been in more of a kind of a classic villain role rather than a rogue or anti-hero. So it's kind of the whole premise that these are the last people you'd expect to guard the galaxy from terror. But we see that embracing that shadow self, the things that really make them outsiders, is what makes it possible for them to achieve their external goals and become fully realized individuals, both internally and in their society. So becoming a fully realized individual in your society kind of looks like, being able to accomplish those external goals through the means that, you're doing things differently than other people do them.
Yeah. Accepting yourself.
Making a place for yourself, really, even if there isn't one that exists.
I love that. All right. So it wouldn't be a structure podcast episode if we didn't break down all of the steps. Like the hero's journey, this doesn't line up exactly with React structure. So deviating some is definitely possible. And how you interpret those moments within the journey is also open to creativity. And honestly, the most important aspect is all the themes and stuff we've discussed already. And Jenny kind of did this breakdown, but in a more general way. But here is the really kind of step-by-step stuff. So first we start with the shift from the feminine to the masculine. Here, the heroine moves away from the divine feminine. Usually this is seen through a mother figure or role model. Peter literally does this by leaving his mother and, being kidnapped into space as she dies. Number 2, the identification with the masculine / the gathering of allies. Here, the heroine expresses a need for freedom. They often find a father figure or a way to societally stand apart. They are kind of gearing up to fight the limitations that have been set upon them. So for Peter, this would be kind of the betrayal of Yondu. Here he's proving his masculinity by standing on his own. Number 3, we get roads and trials and tribulations. Here the heroine faces those trials and tribulations just like the hero does in the hero's journey. People are stopping them from achieving their goals, and more specifically, trying to kind of destroy the heroine. In this movie, it would be when they escape from the prison and, face all those fun battles. Then the next step is experiencing illusory success. The heroine overcomes those obstacles. As Jenny said, this is usually where the hero's journey ends. And in this movie, this is when Peter and the gang are kind of celebrating that they made it out of prison. They go to sell the relic to the collector. They've done it. Woohoo.
Yay. Party time.
Movie not over. Because journey not over. So, next we have the descent to the goddess. Here the heroine realizes that the masculine qualities have failed them. The success was an illusion or hollow. It all kind of falls apart. They have a crisis of self where they realize that being strong isn't all that is needed. That to keep going along this path would be a betrayal of the self or wouldn't even work. So this is where Peter, I think, sacrifices himself to save Gamora. It's his big moment of, I can't stand alone and be strong. She's more important, and to save the world, we need someone else. And then next, we get yearning for the reconnect. Here, the heroine wants to reconnect with the feminine. They want to return to their initial state, but they can't. So for Peter, this is getting trapped by Yondu and knowing that he can't return to running around as an isolated outlaw. He can't keep doing this. He even has to show all the other Guardians that they also can't keep doing this, because if they do, the world will end. This is when they're all sitting around in a circle deciding that they're not just going to go off and be outlaws, that they're going to stand together. So then we get the reconciliation with the wounded masculine. Here the heroine finds the good in the masculine strengths that they have, the bits that aid them. They make peace with this part of their personality. Here I would say it is Peter realizing where his strength kind of comes from. It's him heading out to save the day with a gun. And then finally we get to the union. This is the integration of the masculine and feminine within the heroine. So they recognize the completeness of having both within themselves. They recognize all that was lost from that separation from the feminine. So for Peter, this is when he sees his mother in Gamora and takes her hand. He heals that divide and accepts his true nature, and they all kind of come together, and that's what wins the day.
So who needs therapy when you have bad guys in space to fight?
Exactly.
That's basically it. That's what we're talking about here.
I mean, let's get some bad guys so I can save money on therapy.
Good. Well, you have to be able to go to space for it.
Yeah.
So, got to work on that first.
All right, fine.
I don't know if that'll really be cheaper, especially since insurance probably won't cover going to space.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Well, I'll make some friends with some billionaires. We'll figure it out. All right. So, next month, we are watching the YA dystopian classic. It's a classic at this point, I guess.
It is.
The Hunger Games.
Makes me feel very old, but it is.
It is. There will also be more bonus content on YouTube, so keep an eye on our channel for more resources and info about the topics we've covered.
You can find our podcast on our website, storychatradio.com, or you can follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or many other streaming services. While you're there, please give us a like or leave a rating. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at StoryChatRadio.
Thanks for joining in our nonsense.